to Queering Picture Books from Kidlit Pride. I'm Adid Karam, the author of the forthcoming picture book, 7 Special Somethings, A Noru Story, which comes out in spring of 2021. I am a cis gay man, and I use he and him pronouns, and I am really excited to get to talk to other picture book creators. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I'm terribly boring, so we're going to start off with Jay Young.
Oh no, you're amazing. So I'm Jay, a trans illustrator in a children's field. I spent all of winter in a penguin onesie. I have 2 books out. Yeah, Our Rainbow and Spirit Day, and I'm currently working on 2 other things and a bunch of fun, exciting other projects. Let's go to Kaylani.
Hi, my name is Kaylani Juanita, and I'm a children's book illustrator, and I'm currently trying to work on writing. Some books I've worked on are Magnificent Homespun Brown and When Aiden Becomes a Brother. That's pretty much it.
Very nice.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Hey, I'm Andrea Tsurumi. I'm a non-binary woman who uses she and her, and I'm from New York, but now I live in Philly. And I write and illustrate picture books, like Accident and Crab Cake are 2 of my books, but I also illustrate books for other people, like the Kondo and Kazumi series and Sharko and Hippo, which are coming out sometime this fall. I also do comics for kids, but also for adults. So I love talking about comics and graphic novels. So Kyle.
I'm last. My name is Kyle Luckoff. My pronouns are he and him. I am a trans writer. My first picture book was not queer at all. It's about collective nouns. It's called Storytelling of Ravens. I'm mostly known for this one, When Aiden Became a Brother, which just won the Stonewall Award.
Yay! That's awesome.
That's how I met Kaylani. I have 4 other picture books that are out now. I've got a middle grade coming out in the spring called Too Bright to See. And then I have another picture book that I can't talk about, but Jay knows all about it.
Yeah.
But we're not allowed to talk about it yet. So
yep.
That's me.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot to mention that my pronouns are he, him. There they are.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all again for being here today. And I thought we would start off with what I think is always really exciting. As a writer, I love studying how an artist does work. And so I'm really curious, what's something about the creation of your book, or books for those of you who aren't, a one-off wonder like me, that feels like secret background knowledge or like a fun fact or even an Easter egg that readers have to look forward to?
I can go first because I have a really easy answer to that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I don't have to volunteer someone.
So the name of my main character is kind of an inside joke. For people who are not as familiar, the name Aiden is so common in certain like trans masculine communities that it's become a shorthand. Like if you want to refer to somebody, you could be like, oh, he's just an Aiden, or like, oh, he's going through his Aiden stage. And when I was trying to figure out the name for this main character, it was hard for me because every trans guy name I know is either attached to like a friend or an ex or an enemy or someone that I know. And my friend Azure was like, what if you went with the name Aiden? I was like, no, I can't go with Aiden. Everyone's named Aiden. And he was like, yeah, that's why you have to go with Aiden. And I've had a lot of trans mask readers be like, yeah, no, I see what you did there. I get the joke. It's a joke, but it's also very serious at the same time because it's a good name.
Yep, I know some people named Aiden.
Yes, you do.
Who are trans. Oh, secret info.
Oh, man.
I feel like I like hiding diversity in like all the background characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like the main characters are sometimes like what the writing says they have to be. And then the background, you can add people with like hearing aids and wheelchairs and service dogs and like fat people and like all kinds of folk. It's fun.
I guess a secret thing I kind of do sometimes with my illustrations is I like to, I guess, give like background characters little stories based off of their outfits and their like family members and stuff. One of my favorite things to do is like draw a couple in the background and be like, okay, well, I feel like she would be someone who works from home and is more freelance, and then her wife would be somebody who's probably more business. And I have this whole like life based on, even though they're only on like one page.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of animal characters in the books that I've done. But I'm working on my first like humans book character thing. Illustrating it for somebody else, and Kyle knows about this book. It's by Jared Dapier, called Mr. Russian's Chickens, and it's about two gay guys who have 456 chickens.
Oh, sounds like a wonderful number of chickens.
It's an unreasonable number of chickens, but it's really fun. I didn't realize I had all of this like fan fiction energy in me until I started thinking about how to draw these characters, and then completely just like I don't even know if it's Jared's vision, but just completely went into this mode of, well, Mr. Watson probably like is using the same toothbrush from 5 years ago, but Mr. Nelson got him to switch to electric, but like he hasn't replaced the head in a really long time, and like unnecessary amounts of like detail. But with In Accident, my first book, I just it's all just pages and pages of animals having ridiculous accidents all over the place, which is really, really fun. But inevitably, I would just reach a point where I just kind of exhausted my supply of hijinks. And at one point, I even Google image searched accident because I just ran dry, which you should never do. And nobody should ever look up that stuff because it's very upsetting. But whenever I ran out of steam, I would just throw a whale through something. So if you ever see like a whale crash through like a wall or sticking out of a bush or a window, that's like a moment where I just kind of was like, throw a whale in there. Well, whale.
Yeah, well, no.
These are all amazing stories. I love it. Kyle, speaking of your mentioning the Aiden phase, it's really weird. I have 3 friends that are trans women that all came out right around the same time, and they all settled on Sarah. And then they all like had a confab and were like, "Oh no, this is a disaster." We all have to pick different names, and now no.
I was gonna guess Zoe or Sophie, just because I know a bunch of them.
I don't know. I think there's something about the hive mind that like certain names are just popular at different times. I think that's really cool. So I also am really curious how, as creators, you work, particularly for illustrators, how you work visual representations of queerness into your books when you're working for kids, especially young kids, and when like not all stories are about queerness, but I think we're all very passionate about including queerness in the story nonetheless. How do you go about doing that? Who am I going to pick on this time? Do we have any volunteers?
I have one.
Perfect. Excellent.
Okay. So recently I just did a book with Tamara Doyon, and it's nothing that's specific towards like queer representation, but there's always an opportunity. So like most recently, this is like a spread from the book. There's like different families on each page, but I was like, oh, I thought it would be super cute to do like possibly like a stud, or I don't know, just like a queer Black person who's super tatted and has like a natural hairstyle, and it's just very like, I don't know, casual diversity, I guess, because there was no like reason to make like this family particularly like a queer family, but it felt right in my soul and in my heart. So yeah, I don't know. I guess mine's always just been like, who do I see in my real life that I don't normally see in picture books? And I feel like it's a lot of the time, I feel like I don't see very many, like, especially like, I guess like Black, mask, and also like femme too, like trans people within picture books, and even just relationship wise. Whenever it comes to presenting, like, I guess non-conventional looking like queer couples. Yeah, so I just put them in there. I'm like, okay, who would I don't know, sometimes this is kind of like corny, I guess, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I would probably, who would be like my dream partner? I'm gonna draw here and like an OC form.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I guess apart from like sometimes like very suddenly making their clothes a like certain pride color or something, there's also just like drawing like two individuals together, like here two women with walking their dog that the kid meets. And then like when you see them later, oh, there goes my name. There's them two with a baby, and it's really sweet.
Oh, nice.
Andrea?
Again, it's a lot of animals, so I mean, we don't know what the lives of the fish are in Crab Cake necessarily, although everything is a metaphor for humanity. I was thinking about this because I got a question about this from Lisa Shia on Instagram about, especially with picture books, like how do you represent queerness in picture books and in ways that are subtle. And then she asked me also about pronouns, because in Crab Cake, crab doesn't have a crab is just crab doesn't really use a pronoun. And anytime I use a default pronoun, I use she specifically. And which usually like, bless everybody's hearts, most of the reviews that I've gotten completely miss that, and they always use he with crab, or like he with all of the fish or other things, which is something that I've been thinking a lot about since, I don't know if this is answering the question, but it's the closest to answering the question as I think I'm going to get, about like deconstructing the idea of the default cis male protagonist. Like the idea that the baseline is he, and there's been so much written about this, there's been so much covered about this, like this is a problem that reaches into like so many aspects of children's literature and society. But it's interesting, like as a question, like if you look at the numbers, like overarching amounts of protagonists in children's books are gendered male, specifically, even especially if they show up as animals, it's always like he. And I had an interesting experience when I was doing a reading in Brooklyn, where I was reading Not Your Nest, a book I illustrated by Gideon Stir, and it's about a little yellow bird whose nests keep getting stolen by jerkwad animals. So, you know, just that kind of a story. And it's a she, like the little bird is a she, and very specifically, like Gideon made her a she because of that discrepancy in numbers. And I remember reading the story saying she, but she's not wearing like a bow or anything. It's just the little yellow bird is getting increasingly angry. And when the boys were talking about her in the story, they kept saying he. And at some point, like I remember like my back was turned and I was drawing on an easel, and I heard like a boy kept saying like he does this and then he does this. And I heard like a girl in the back of the room say like she. That was just very quietly. And then after that, I just became very emphatic about saying she every time I was talking. Like, yes, look at her flying. Like, let her do this. I was just thinking about like how early does the idea of a default get ingrained in like kids' minds and in culture's minds? And that's something I fought against myself, even of just like, well, I want to give like graphic novels to my cousins, and one of them is a girl and I give her anything, but like one of them is a boy. I'm like, should I give him Raina Telgemeier's books? I'm like, why would I not? Right. But like, it's super deep. And that goes to like how, you know, like there's a kind of, like when you're fighting that default, you're fighting that kind of like after school specialness of like representations of people. Like the idea that if you are not like a cis white male, like if your character is not that, then it's like a special book for like other people, and it's not for them because everything is for them. And like that I think is like a big part of deconstructing like problems in kids literature and empathy. And I'm sorry, I'm a tangent queen, I go everywhere with my answers, but that's, I think a lot about that and try to like, who are my characters, what genders are represented, and like who is there in it. But that's always kind of running in the back of my head.
Yeah, I absolutely relate. Like I once did like a short like kids book for fun, and the character was non-binary, and the dedication was literally like to the pronouns they, them. And still like when people tell me about them, they're like, Wendell is like this, like, and then they start talking about like him and how they like him so much. And then I'm like, no, it's they.
Right.
this parent at the school that I used to work for wrote an article about the like default male pronouns for animals and other like non-human characters in books.
Mhm.
I'm just adding to your tangent, but then I want to tell you something that Kaylani did that was great. But I was helping her with that article, and I came up with the line, like, we know the idea that like girls can be anything, right? Like girls can be doctors or whatever the hell. But can anything be a girl? Like a building or a tugboat or a bear or a rat or or a mailbox or a phone booth? Because like there are picture books about phone booths and tugboats and buildings. They're always boys. Not always. You'll find me an exception, and then you'll be like, not all of them. But yeah, I just like the reverse. Like girls can be anything, but can anything be a girl? But I just wanted to show. So I have a copy of Homespun Brown right here, and it's beautiful. But there's also this last spread in Aiden that Kaylani had. Like, I had nothing to do with these illustrations. It's all Kaylani. So here you've got like all of these queers, including the and then, so in this little background, I like to joke that that kiddo is also named Aiden. And like it's like a little kiddo in like wild purple pants and suspenders and a tie with like that hairstyle. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, Kaylani knows a bunch of trans guys. Like you can't just like come up with that without knowing like that person or a lot of that person. And I feel like this book has a lot of like little subtle queer tells that like people who know will recognize it, and not everyone will necessarily see that, but that's because it's worked in so perfectly in the background. I've decided that in this book, which I also didn't illustrate, that hat is gay.
Wonderful.
100%.
What'd you say, D? Oh yeah, it is a gay hat.
100%.
Yes.
It's like we're making these books and characters. If we want them to be gay, then they are very gay.
Right.
Indeed.
I feel like there's just like a look too, like I don't know, all of like anytime I'm speaking amongst like my other like queer illustrator friends and we're all just talking about stuff, I feel like there are just subtle nuances of stuff just naturally added in, like Kyle was saying, that I don't always necessarily, sometimes it's stuff that I like purposely think about, like, okay, like stylistic wise, I guess, but for the most part, I feel like a lot of it is just kind of natural sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
and then even going back to like the conversation earlier about everything automatically being like gendered as cis and male specifically, it's like sometimes I wonder whenever it comes to people who do that, I wonder like, oh my gosh, so this is just something that you are around all the time. And I feel like it's really telling whenever you see a picture book where the majority of like the people are all like white straight people, because it's like, wow, okay, that lets me know that as an illustrator, this is like the reflection of what you see, and it makes me sad a lot of the time. But whenever I see books like the books that we're all doing, I'm like, okay, so my people are out there. Like, I have people who think like me and feel like me too.
Yeah, I feel like it's important that like people in like small rural towns where it's like majority white get like books that tell them that the rest of the world is not like that.
Agreed.
I agree.
Speaking of culture and coding and representation, I'm really curious to kind of expand the conversation and talk a little bit about how, as we are moving past the cis straight default, we're also moving past the white default. How do you include people of color in your work? How do you code for it? How do you make it explicit? And like, which details do you find yourself gravitating to?
I feel like for me, it might be things like games played by like people of a certain culture, or like small trinkets they might carry. Like in the same book, Spirit Day, I decided to make a family that was Black and Asian, and they were playing mahjong. That was very like a small thing. And I guess like other things that I do whenever it's not like a culture that I came from is I start looking up things like, what is it like to live in Mexico? And I feel like it's very important to get people who are within that culture to tell you about it instead of people who are like just documenting it or kind of like not seeing what it's like to actually be in that sort of environment. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
I agree. I think it's always like good to do research stuff, and I think like the comment about the like playing games and like showing activities and stuff are good like indicators of things. I am really obsessed with food, so
Oh yeah.
I always include like food and stuff.
Same.
Sometimes it's small little details. Like there's this spread. There's a spot illustration in the Aiden book where these are Aiden's parents on the front, but just you guys already knew that. But I, because Aiden's like biracial, Black and Asian, and I'm also Black and Asian.
Nice.
So I drew like some food right there, and what I drew was like a plate that had like an ube roll on it, so it's like purple, and then a young coconut, so it's like he's having a snack that I would like most definitely have as a kid. And I feel like it's little stuff like that people notice sometimes, especially when it comes to like specific cultural foods, like seeing purple yam. Like a lot of different Asian people and people who just eat tropical food in general would see something like purple in a yam as a dessert and be like, oh, that's probably like like ube. And then taro is kind of similar too because it's that milky like light purple.
Yep.
And then even like packaging, like I try to pay attention a lot to packaging inside of like children's illustration. And I've been drawing lately, like my thing is drawing like banana leaf packaging because I feel like a lot of different countries, whenever it comes to like indigenous cultural foods, they use like instead of plastic, oh, I'll just wrap this in a banana leaf. And I don't know, it's just little stuff like that. And I feel like continuously showing other people like small little bits of other types of people's everyday life is how like slowly we'll become to like normalize like different types of culture. I feel like sometimes it doesn't have to be explicitly like pointed out, but sometimes just the subtle things are really nice too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That specificity, I think, is so key, right? Because you want to see all your characters as people and individuals, not as types. Because that will, I mean, it's bad writing also or bad illustrating, but like also like if you really want people to be human individuals, like those little details like really let you see them as individuals. Again, this is like the first time I'm drawing like humans, but the research and the specificity is really fun. So it's two gay guys and one of them I just decided was Japanese American like myself. So he's Japanese American, so he's not like Japanese, which is a different thing. But like there's like little things. He's got a daruma over the fireplace. He gets really annoyed when the chickens are like tracking mud inside the house.
Yeah.
Like the shoes thing is the thing. And then like my favorite part is like there's a scene where the chickens have like stolen his pomade and have made like punk haircuts. But there's a wall like I have in my house, like a wall of ancestors. Like you got your grandpa's army portrait, like the wedding portrait or whatever. And so it's like a blended portrait of his and his partner's like family. And it's just like, yeah, everyone's got ancestors. They're all like together. Some of them are in a kimono. Some of them are like in a babushka. It's like, that feels fun and layered. Yeah.
Clothing is a good one too. Cause I just realized like, I have not really seen like headscarves or do-rags in picture books. So I make it a point whenever I draw like Black kids sleeping to draw them with headscarves on. Cause that was like part of like growing up. I live in like Fairfield, Vallejo, San Francisco, and Sacramento, I guess are all pretty considered like pretty diverse. But like the school I went to was a school and I guess like considered like a richer area. So I didn't really feel myself reflected amongst the students that I was like with. And part of the reason why I felt so uncomfortable sometimes sleeping over people's houses was because there would be all these questions about like headscarves and like do-rags and all that other stuff. So whenever I draw like kids sleeping, I feel like it's important to show like other people have different night routines and night regimens. Like in the Aiden book, I do a headscarf. In Magnificent Homestead Brown, there's a headscarf. Because I want to normalize like certain specific aspects of Black culture that are just not real, that you would probably mainly see a Black person bringing up versus someone who doesn't know what it's like to sleep and be Black.
Yeah.
That's
Yep,
really
and now we'll all start drawing headscarves.
Well, it makes you realize your own blind spots when you start like really
Yeah.
realizing how little you know and how little the general culture has prepared you to be curious about you know, the lives of like people who are not white, right? And then you're like, oh my God, how can you live your whole adult life without like seeing books like this, right?
I think it's really exciting the opportunities we get from picture books to share our cultures with people, and that's something that has brought me a lot of joy as well. But I'd like, if we can, to turn to just kind of more nuts and bolts crafty things. I feel like so often we don't get to discuss those things, especially if we're not white people who are always talking about craft. And so I'm really curious, like, what is it like as an artist approaching a text that you're going to illustrate? Or as a writer, what is it like preparing a text knowing it's going to be illustrated?
Yeah, we tend to get a kind of like a long like manuscript that's then like sectioned into like roughly the pages that are, well, roughly the text that's going to be on each page. So like we'll know if like these 2 sentences go here or if these like 4 sentences go there. And then we just kind of like start thumbnailing out roughly like art that fits those words. Sometimes they have like direction, like this cat must have a certain color or something that's not like necessarily written in the text. And then we kind of just like go through the whole book through that with thumbnails, and then like we tighten it out as sketches to send to the like publisher or whoever is going to look through it. And then they give their feedback, and then we do the final art after.
I don't have an artistic or like a visually artistic bone in my body. I just don't like it and can't do it and don't want to learn. But I found the more picture books I write, the more I love the practice of intentionally writing around something to leave room for the illustrations to like come alive and breathe in their own way. Like when I was first working on Aiden, I hadn't quite hit my stride yet. I mean, I'm still always learning, but I kept including details that weren't necessary, like, you know, sitting at the dinner table when that's what the illustrations would show, or like looked sad when that's the picture's job. And it's become a really fun challenge to intentionally choose words to leave open that space, as opposed to writing novels where you do have to say what's going on and where people are at. People often ask me, like, I mean, the question that I always get is like, how did you pick your illustrator? And the answer is I didn't. Not that I wouldn't, I mean, I would pick Kaylani if I could. I just didn't have that choice. And then, you know, how did you two work together? And the answer is we didn't. Like, I always tell kids that like all of the artistic interpretation was entirely Kaylani, coming from Kaylani and her brain and like her heart. And sometimes people ask like, oh, isn't that hard? Like, is it weird to see a book with pictures you weren't expecting? But because I'm not a visual person at all, as soon as I see the pictures, my brain is like, oh, that's what they look like. That's just what they've always looked like. And I can't even remember if I had images in my head at all. Those have just been washed away. Like, I just don't think visually. So I've been really lucky so far. I've only been paired with like amazing illustrators.
Oh yeah, generally like an artist or a writer has an agent who then connects them to like the publisher, and then the publisher is the person who then like puts people together.
Yeah, I feel like there was at first I remember the first picture book I did, it was a chronicle book, and the author's name is Kathy Ellen. but I assumed that we were going to be in contact with each other. Like it was the first book I'd ever done, and part of me was kind of really scared and nervous because they give you so much freedom whenever it comes to like the first round of sketches, to where it kind of feels like scary sometimes. And with Kyle, it was just like a really liberating process because I feel like his writing specifically, just he's really, really good at conveying emotion with words in like a very short amount of words, which I feel like is a really hard thing to do. And at first it felt a little bit challenging because I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to draw something to accompany these words? These words are so good where I really have to make sure the illustrations match them. And a lot of what I feel like what I did was I put some of my own emotions in it, but then as well, I was like I was doing a lot of research and listening to like just trans people and some like Black trans people speak about like what it feels like to be like misgendered or to like experience trans like microaggressions towards trans people, like personal nuanced things that I will never experience. And it was an interesting, I feel like it was just the book was an interesting experience because you really, to like break it down, because the children's book is like, you spend forever on it. That thing is like a year long's worth of work. So to revisit the manuscript like 3 or 4 different times, like not more than 3 or 4 times, but 4 different iterations of like sketches of like 40 sketches. I don't know, it's like a really magical and surreal experience because then at the end it's like it looked nothing like what it started. But I love how it ended up. And then even just like, okay, so I have a couple like outlines. They're just super chaotic.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I usually do is like I take a manuscript and then I highlight certain stuff, and then based off of what I highlight, I do like an outline sheet of like thumbnails, and then I can see like the beat of every page, so I know the page turns. And all like the key important moments are going to be like, I want them to match the beat of the manuscript, not just like the illustrations are their own separate thing. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
I love that. The beats are such an important part to get. Like, you go through and you just like say like note the emotional arcs, like think big sad moment, big like happy moment, like this is building, this is like coming down from it. Like having that like blowout contact sheet or like thumbnails is so useful for building out like your map of the story of like what are the emotional highs and lows that you're building to, or if it's a funny book, like what are the beats you need to hit to build up to the punchline, and then how are you going to release that, or like how are you going to like deny that or have a reaction shot in it, like all of that stuff it's so fun.
Yeah, continuing on.
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, continuing on the research you were doing, it's just like so fun starting a new children's book and just like wondering what you'll learn from it.
That's really
a lot of self-reflection. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, don't be. Continue,
yeah, I
please.
think picture books, starting a new one, it's always scary doing the first round of sketches, and it makes you feel really confident and smart when you got all the beats down. And then once it's done and you get like the first proof of the book, it just becomes this thing of like, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like every time I get like the first proof, I've only done 3 children's books and I'm working on my 4th and 5th one right now, but every time I see the final product, I reflect on the entire experience of like, wow, I had a lot of highs and a lot of lows during this project, and I cannot believe I freaking finished. So I did that.
Yeah. And then you start a new project and you're like, can I do this?
Or you start a new project and you're like, why did I do this to myself again?
Yeah. I think it's like real cool being visual people to be able to look back on your past like years and just like visually see what you've done.
Yeah. Have you ever done that thing where you go to schools and you show art from when you were a kid? Like your before things? That's so fun to do. I was talking to like a little girl and like showing her like, is me at kindergarten, this is me at like 4th grade. And I was like, what happened? She's like, you got better. Like, yeah. But I realized like I played myself because I had brought my books, and I like even just showed her like, hey, here's my book from 3 years ago, and here's my book from last year. Like, what else happened? She's like, you got better? I'm like, yeah. You can see it all the time.
Rude.
Well, thank goodness she thought you were getting better, because that would have been a real awkward.
They are honest.
They are so
that.
honest. I have been asked why my head is so shiny at visits before, so that's exciting.
Oh no, kids are so honest.
I adore them. So we've talked a little about like the process, but I'm also really curious about the place. Like, what does it really look like to do it? Where do you do your work? Do you work on the computer or start on paper? How do you keep on task? And like, what are you thinking about as you're doing the work? What makes you worried? What makes you feel pride in what you're doing? Sorry, that's a really rambling question. You can feel free to answer any or all of it, or even none of it, and redirect it as you choose. I'm not picky.
Yeah.
So prior to like,
no, you go first.
I was gonna say like prior to like this moment in time that we're living in, and the reason why we're talking on screens instead of in person, I was very adamant that I couldn't write at home. I had to work at coffee shops or libraries or out in public, because I'm very much an extrovert, and the like coming in and going of people was like necessary for my brain to just like focus. And that turned out to be fake. That turned out just to be a lie that I was telling myself, because I like wrote a whole novel sitting on my bed, which is right next to me because I'm in a very small 1-bedroom in Brooklyn.
Nice.
So that's fake. That's not real. But I do find that if I am trying to write something more, like if I'm trying to write poetry or a speech or something like less regimented, then I tend to use the spattered old notebook and a pen, and then I just sit outside and do it. Especially poetry. I can't write poetry inside, which isn't to say that I can write poetry. I just do sometimes. And I don't like, sometimes kids ask like, how do you write? How do you write a story? And the answer is that I think of the story I want to tell, and then I pick words, and then I write those words down, and I put the words in order to tell the story. It like feels both like magic and like the most simple thing in the world. It's just, I think of what I want to say, and then I choose the words that say it. I actually kind of messed up my head the other day when I realized that I'm working on a second middle grade novel, because I just wrapped up the first one. And I realized that my second book is pretty much the same words as my first book. They're just in a different order. That messed me up.
Well.
Oh no, you started meta-ing yourself.
Same words, different order. Sorry, everyone.
It's like holding another book and being like, I wonder how many words my book will have in common with this book.
A lot, like but and the, like lots of the same words.
Yep.
Plagiarism.
Word stealing. I guess in contrast, almost everything I've ever drawn while living here was done right here in this chair. I have a desktop set up over here, and all of my books are covering my tablet, but I also have a 10-year-old like Wacom bamboo tablet that is still kicking. And I often start my sketches in a sketchbook, which is currently filled with so many D&D notes. But
Yes. Are you DMing or playing? Sorry, that's all I'm going to ask
I am
about.
playing 3 campaigns, but I am currently writing up a campaign of my own where everybody is solving a mystery set in a senior center.
Oh,
And so like there's going to be like no weapons. You can make a case for maybe holding a spoon or something. But,
oh my god.
And then you're going to have like so many other things that you have to worry about, like occasionally rolling to see whether like you immediately fall asleep, or if you forgot why you came here, or like you can't hold things that are more than like 5 pounds. Anyway.
That sounds amazing.
Back to the subject at hand. Yeah, I work here. My bed is also 2 feet away. Yep.
I have Super chaotic energy. So I work just in random places throughout the house, like very inconsistently. Like during the winter time, because sometimes I really don't like spending money on heat. So during the winter time, I'll sit on the couch and I'll be wrapped in a blanket and I'll have my tablet in front of me and I'll just draw like that. Or sometimes whenever I'm really like behind on work and I have like a problem with like sometimes I don't know, with quarantine it's specifically been hard with scheduling because I'm so used to going to school to where it's like I was kind of just scheduling everything around that. But since time is a lie and we're all just here living however we live, I it's not good, but sometimes I bring my tablet to bed and I'll lay on my side and just draw while I'm like supposed to be sleeping. But I know that like it's good to have boundaries because that produces better work, I feel like. And a lot of stuff that I've tried to like squeeze in, I have to end up redoing sometimes because it's not all the way there anyways, because of like trying to do too many things at once.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of you notice a difference in how it feels between like writing energy and drawing energy? And in writing energy, I also include doing your initial sketches versus like inking or coloring or doing finals. Because there's like a, but like first draft versus editing, maybe for you, Kyle. Like first stab versus like cleanup work later, you know, like there's a different mental like feeling to each of those things. When I was in New York, I had a studio that I rented with some friends, and then I was living in a 1-bedroom in Queens. But you're always like on top of each other a bit. And now since I've moved to Philly, I have like a drawing desk and a tablet desk and like a lovely workshop area that I do pretty much all of my drawing and all of my like finals on. But when I have to write or when I do my first pass, my first stab at sketches off of someone else's manuscript or my own manuscript, which I call writing, but it's really thumbnailing, like it's doodling. I have to get out of the house. So I'll used to go to like the Philadelphia Museum of Art is near me, like go to their cafeteria with headphones and just kind of get out to different cafes, like mostly to get away from my computer. Seems like a thing. And I'm very interested in how like those of you who use the tablet so much, like have that boundary between like your normal computering life and your drawing practice, because you can't escape it as easily as I can. But that energy, like I just need to get out of myself, away from my home to do it. And then everything else I can bring back in to work.
Yeah, lately I've been feeling like doing like thumbnails or sketches or kind of like the bigger problem solving steps. So like you need more of your brain on it. So I can't be distracted doing other things while doing that. But like once I actually have the lines down, then it becomes kind of just like technical problem solving over like making sure the values are right and the colors are okay and so on. So like I can zone out a lot more doing that.
I think because I go back and forth a lot sometimes, depending on what stage I'm at. Because sometimes I do like multimedia, so I'll do it by hand and do like textures by hand, and then scan them in and overlay them over like the digital stuff. Like for the Aiden book, there's like watercolor textures, and then there's this. It's really hard to see, but it was like a doily type of thing where I had gotten it. It was just like an old piece of decorative tissue paper, but then I spilled water on it, so it was like bleeding a little bit. So I do a lot of times I just overlay stuff and go back and forth. Like I feel like whenever I'm getting kind of tired of drawing lines, then I just kind of switch to something else. And I don't remember who it was. I was talking to an editor one time, and she was telling me like, oh, it's good to start off with doing the final art from like the middle of the book and then skip around versus starting at the front and then working your way to the back, because then you can see your character slowly, gradually changing. So after that, I kind of was just like, oh my gosh, I'm never like working from start to finish like that ever again. And in like order. But how I feel like also I really like just drawing clothing patterns. So like I'll get all of the lines done. I'll do all the final lines, and after all the lines are finished, I'll jump around between coloring characters, background, and then clothing. And I have all of those on like different layers of like flat art, so that way I could just drop in stuff and fill in stuff. But I don't know. I am realizing now after we're all talking that I am very inconsistent with how I do things.
Well, it works.
Yeah, that's the only thing that matters. Like like do people ever ask you like what's your creative process, as if you like wake up on time every day and like get your like breakfast and like you start work and then you stop, and like it's never like that.
That's how I work actually. I like
Oh God.
He's a
very
unicorn.
regimented routine that I almost never deviate from. But that's because I'm a monster.
Incredible.
Kyle's Instagram, Kyle, you eat really adult snacks. Like Kyle will be like, I had a roasted tomato with a brioche bun and some cake. And I'm like, wow, Kyle, oh my gosh, I ate some rice cakes today and with some crackers. Like, oh gosh.
I want to argue with you, but I can't. I'll be like, no, that's not true. But it's true. I'm gonna try to make my own Pop-Tarts tomorrow.
Oh my God.
Oh, that sounds so good. Now I want a Pop-Tart. It's so funny also you mentioning like the different energy of like creating for the first time versus revising. I actually have a variable height standing desk that I write at, and I have different heights for when I'm drafting versus when I'm revising.
What? Okay, so what's
like I stand when I'm drafting and I have to sit when I'm revising.
Okay.
I don't know. I just can't. I like I think on my feet when I'm creating, and if I have to like fix something, I have to be sitting down to look at it. It's very weird.
No, I feel it.
But I have kind of one last like big question for all of you, which is, what brings you joy about making children's books and picture books in particular? I feel like joy can be hard to find these days, sometimes in the quarantines. So what about the work brings you joy?
I feel like I can, like, being creators, we have the power to directly change like what people are seeing. So like whether that's like POC or like disabled people or just like a gigantic amount of chickens, like yeah, like we can just put that in their eyeballs.
I agree like with that totally. Like the ability to tell stories because matter so much to me, because stories have changed my life so much. Like I think that like I've said this before, but like when you grow up and like something is really important to you and has an important place in your life, which for me was books, you just spend so much time with it and you love it so much that you can't help but pay a lot of attention to it. And after a while, that can kind of become the thing that you do. Like that becomes your career. Like everyone I talk to who does picture books or does children's books, like they're not in it by accident. Like they fell in, most of them are not in it like they were doing editorial and they fell into it. It's because like there was this important relationship with books and with stories when they were kids that mattered a lot. So when you have the opportunity to do what mattered a lot, or when you've like bludgeoned your way into a career where you get to do what matters a lot to you, like that's really cool. The beauty of like an enormous page is like, I was thinking about your question compared to like a graphic novel or, you know, a middle grade or anything else. But like the beauty of a picture book is that beautiful size of page where you get to place. It's a wonderful playground of interaction between text and image that it just feels very rich and fun and full of like great potential and great moments. That it's different when it's a smaller canvas or it's a smaller, you know, it's not any less deep, but there's just kind of a narrative decadence to like a big wide page that's just so fun.
I agree with what everybody is saying about like having the power to create like the world and space that you want to exist. So whenever I think about like picture books, and I think about how even throughout like the rough and difficult times with the book, I think about how pleased I am with the overall product, and I guess like what you're leaving behind culturally with that product. Whenever I think about like representation, I think about growing up and not really. I'm only 27. I turned 27 in November, but I call myself 27 already. but I think about like growing up not getting to see like myself reflected in a lot of picture books. Like the time I had seen, and this is like it's funny, but it's also sad.
Yeah.
I felt like I related a ridiculous amount to like Arthur the Aardvark, because I was like, oh my gosh, you're brown and you have glasses. And I think it's sad because it's like Arthur's also pretty much coded as white and an animal and a male. And to be 27 now and an adult and have the power to be like, okay, I want to draw my own reflection in picture books because other people can relate to that reflection as well. And that's when it becomes that whole like I could talk forever about like the oppositional gaze and like bell hooks and like moments of rupture when you're a child and you look at something and you realize that's not me. But then the ecstatic amount of joy when you see something and you say that is me. It's crazy to have moments like that as an adult looking at children's literature, because all I can think is like, oh my gosh, I'm having this as an adult now. I can only imagine how right now are feeling. So yeah, that is the best. Getting to see other people, especially children, see books and that I worked on and say, I can relate to this. This is me.
The main times that I feel joy in this whole process is when I'm in front of kids with books. But since that's not going to happen for a while, I've been noticing this feeling of exhilaration that I get. I'm going to shift this a little bit to my middle grades just because I want to, whatever. But because most of the books that I write and will continue to write are about like the complexity and depth and richness of trans life, not just figuring out who you are and not just telling people about it, but like what happens after that. I get this feeling of exhilaration when I think that I've successfully managed to write something for children that has not existed in their literature, and yet writing it in a way that makes it seem natural and eternal and universal, and like, of course this isn't a book for kids, why wouldn't it be? Because that's like, I don't want to write a book that feels like
instructional.
Yeah, like so there's this, so like for example, I have to go plug in my computer. I'm gonna stand up and walk while I'm talking. Actually, no, I've got a few minutes. No, I'm gonna stand up now. So
Journey.
You're all gonna go on a very small tour of my very, very small apartment. There's my cat. Well, she's not.
Yay, cat. Oh.
This cat. She's just living with me for now. All right. And now you can see on my fridge behind me, there's like drawings from children.
Oh, that is awesome.
Oh, that's so cute.
But so there's this book that I'm in love with called Sex is a Funny Word by Corey Silverberg. And there's a scene in it where they're talking about like, you know, your body parts. And the narrative says, some people call the parts of your body that have to do with sex your private parts. But because any part of your body can be private, we call them your middle parts because they're in the middle part of your body. And just that like simple statement of any part of your body can be private. And then this like matter of fact, of course that's the way it is, but without turning it into a lecture, just saying any part of your body can be private. And that's the sort of like effortless, but crucial style that I want to have in my books. Like, of course this exists. Why would, just because it's never existed, not that I'm saying that I write things that have never existed, but like,
yeah.
Just because something isn't like commonly known doesn't mean that it has to be like excruciatingly picked apart in order to be understood.
Like your books can have much the same words as other books, but they're just rearranged in a way that hasn't been done before.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This was an amazing conversation. And before we say goodbye, I'd love it if you all could tell everyone out in the audience where they can find you and your good works. And crucially, remind us what your next projects are. We'll start with you, Kyle.
I just talked though.
I know, right? We're reverse card, like an Uno.
You can find me in my very small apartment in Brooklyn, or at KyleLuckoff.com, or I don't know, bookshop, I think is where people are buying books from. I have a middle grade called Too Bright to See coming out in April, and then you should be on the lookout for an announcement that Jay knows about, but we're not allowed to talk about yet. But there is a new picture book from these two minds eventually.
And a third one that we also aren't allowed to talk about yet.
I want to know.
Excellent. Well, Jay, where can people find you?
So my website is jyangart.com, and some books probably wherever you can buy books. I am currently working on like a bunch of things for a company that doesn't have like my name on it at all. So Amplify Education. I am working on a math textbook, and they recently published a bunch of bilingual children's books that have my work on them.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm currently working on The Good Hair Day, which will be coming out in like a year or two, and the also secret project that we are not allowed to talk about with Kyle.
I haven't had a good hair day since 2005, so that sounds like a great picture book already.
I think your hair looks great because it looks like mine, so you know what?
Exactly.
It's like, what if we had a book about hair, like featuring a main character who didn't have hair?
Just like Jean-Luc Picard, guys. It's all good.
Oh my gosh, we're going to go for another hour if someone mentions Jean-Luc Picard again. Andrea, where can people find you and what's next?
So on Instagram, I'm at Tsurumi. I think if you Google my last name, it's Tsurumi. It's just me and this Japanese sewage pump that have the same name, so I'm pretty findable. And then my website is andreatsurumi.com, and you can find my book Crab Cake or Accident on Bookshop or any of your indie stores. They can order it for you. I am at the moment illustrating Mr. Watson's Chickens, which should come out sometime next year, but this fall. I'm really excited. This series that I've been working on for a while with the author David Goodner called Kondo and Kazumi is coming out. It's an illustrated early chapter book series for kids, and it's really, really fun, and I can't wait for people to actually see it because there's a lot of in-jokes in it. Yeah, so that's me.
Awesome, thank you. And Kaylani, how about you?
Okay, so
Yes.
you guys, but at Kaylani Juanita for my Instagram, and then just KaylaniJuanita.com for like my portfolio website that has not been updated in 3 years. But there's 2 books that are coming out that I just finished. One's A House for Every Bird, and I illustrated that one. And then another one I illustrated, I think it's called, I can't remember the title for some reason. It's called The Little Things. And then I have like 2 other projects that I'm working on that I can't talk about. And one that I wrote and illustrated that has not been announced, but
exciting.
I'm so excited.
I know, I'm me too. It's gonna be crazy. I'm gonna make all the illustrations really a lot. Everyone's gonna be really cute. Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I cannot wait. Well, I'm Adib Khorram. You can find me online at adibkhorram.com, ADIBKHORRAM. On Twitter and Instagram at the same, because turns out I didn't have to fight anyone for my usernames.
I have to fight everybody.
Right. And my debut picture book, 7 Special Somethings, comes out February 16th, 2021 from Dial Books for Young Readers. Thank you so much to Kidlit Pride for hosting us all. Thank you in our audience for joining us. Enjoy Pride, be gay, and do crimes. Bye.